All right, so what we're examining now is that we're zooming in on this pericardial cavity, and this pericardial cavity has these two layers. One's going to be called the visceral layer, the layer that's in contact with the organ, and then there's the parietal layer, which is the outer wall of that pericardial cavity. And so there is fluid in this space called pericardial fluid. And so now we're examining what exactly is going on here at this space and even at this space. So we zoom in on that, and what we see is this very picture. Again, we're seeing the transverse cut made of that edge of that pericardial cavity, and we see this photo. Now, in this photo, we see that the deepest layer, the inside of the heart, has cells called endothelium. Exactly the same type of cells that are found in blood vessels. Blood vessels also have within them endothelia. And just like all epithelial tissue, there's going to be a basement membrane side, a connective tissue side, and so that's what the areolar tissue is doing on that side. It's serving as the basement membrane for the endothelia inside the heart. And so this layer, since it's inside, it's deep to the heart, it is considered the inside, or this would be where the inner cavity of the heart is. And so this layer together, the endothelia and the basement membrane, these are considered the endocardium. So endocardium refers to this space. Right past that areolar tissue, you have cardiac muscle. This is the same cardiac muscle we explored in lab with the intercalated discs, involuntary, found in the heart. That's what we mean when we say muscle of the heart, cardiac muscle, or myocardium. It means the cardiac muscle cells. And they have, inside of them, they have sarcomeres. They have thick and thin filaments. They require calcium. There's even a clinical test that if you want to check to see if there's damage in the heart muscles, you check for troponin or tropomyosin. And if you see a lot of troponin or tropomyosin in the blood vessels, that means that the cells are dying. And so that is a way that you can measure heart cell or cardiac muscle cell death. It's by understanding your thick and thin filaments. So myocardium refers to the layer of muscle within the heart. You can even see the intercalated discs are painted there for you. I kind of highlighted it in a deeper purple there. And at the end of the day, what intercalated discs are is that they are gap junctions. It allows each one of these cells to communicate well with each other and be in harmony. So with that, though, we're still exploring this wall. And so now we made it to the superficial aspect of the heart. And so we are looking at the pericardial cavity with its two membranes, its two walls. It has the visceral layer and the parietal layer on the outside. These cells are also simple squamous, exactly the same as the endothelium, but they don't share the same name. They are called mesothelium. Whenever it's simple squamous inside of a serous membrane, it is called mesothelia. And so you got mesothelia, that's what the visceral layer is. It's nothing but a layer of mesothelia and its basement membrane. And so if you examine the mesothelia, the simple squamous cells, you can see it has its basement membrane, its connective tissue layer underneath. On the opposite end, the parietal layer also has this side where there's a lumen on this side, and then it's connected to the connective tissue below, the basement membrane on that side. And so these mesothelia produce the pericardial fluid. Now we have to clearly define the words parietal layer and visceral layer. Visceral layer is pretty easy. It's the mesothelia and the connective tissue layer below. That's what we mean when we say the visceral layer. The only thing I gotta add that makes it a little complicated is that when you look at the word epicardium, the visceral layer is the epicardium, and that's it. That's what makes it so confusing is that just this piece, let me get it on frame, just this piece is the epicardium. You would think that the whole thing would be epicardium, but no, it's only the visceral layer. That is the epicardium. I think that's very confusing. So we're saying it one last time so we can move on with clarity. The visceral layer, the wall of cells that is touching the heart, is the boundary or what makes up the epicardium. The parietal layer that matches it, even though they make up the serous pericardium, they make up the cavity, the pericardial cavity with fluid in here. Technically, the parietal layer is kind of its own layer. It's not part of the epicardium. Not part of the epicardium. And so what we just learned is the pericardium is the sac that contains pericardial fluid. That sac is made out of the parietal layer and the visceral layer. The parietal layer is not part of the epicardium. The visceral layer is part of the epicardium. And so the pericardium can be summed up as both layers, but they are not part of the same. The visceral layer is the epicardium. And don't forget that yesterday we learned that there is an outer fibrous layer surrounding all of this. So there's a layer outside of the pericardium called the outer fibrous layer or the fibrous pericardium, and it's outside. Now the text above is just summarizing the same data with some text. And so the pericardium again is going to be made of the two layers, visceral and parietal. Don't forget that there is an outer fibrous pericardium on top of those two layers. The epicardium we clearly want to define as the visceral layer of that serous pericardium. That's what makes up the epicardium. You want to put as a little side note, does not include the parietal pericardium. Only includes visceral. Sorry. The myocardium is going to be the muscle layers of cardiac muscle. Blood vessels and nerves will run through it. The endocardium will have simple squamous made of endothelia, which is just simple squamous, inside of blood vessels and the heart. The word endothelium always means simple squamous inside of blood vessels and the heart. Just like it says here, I'll highlight it in the text. Endothelium inside of heart and blood vessels. Now we get into the cardiac muscle, skeletal muscle differences, the intercalated discs. What they are is that they are gap junctions. And these gap junctions is a pathway for chemical communication between the cardiac muscle cells. And what it really relays, what it really chemically communicates is action potentials. It communicates sodium, it communicates potassium, to depolarize and repolarize. That's what it needs to communicate through the cardiac muscle cells. Remember, the sarcolemma can carry action potentials from the neuron. And so just like that, these muscle cells can also carry action potentials. That means depolarization, repolarization, which at the end of the day means sodium potassium comes through afterwards, and then it relays it right after to the next cell. That's why the heart can beat as one. These intercalated cells allow for the action potential to travel fast between cardiac muscle cells. We'll learn how with the name of the nervous tissue towards the end, the cardiac conduction system. But for now, you just need to know intercalated discs are gap junctions between cardiac muscle cells. And don't forget the basics. Skeletal muscle is voluntary, cardiac muscle involuntary. We move on to now larger gross anatomy structures. And so we start where we already kind of been. We start at the pulmonary trunk, and I want to draw your attention to the fact one last time that this pulmonary trunk is painted blue, but it is technically an artery. So that's there for you to annotate. Next, this pulmonary trunk, like the trunk of a tree, will lead to branches, and so it branches into arteries. The two branches, and you got two lungs, you got to send blood cells inside of these blood vessels. They got to go to the lungs to get oxygenated, and you got two lungs. You got one on the left side and one on the right side. So this leads me to my next point. Know your left, know your right. Your pulmonary trunk will send vessels to the left. The right side will always have the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. Whenever you look at a heart, look for that superior vena cava, which is a large vein. It brings blood into the heart, not away, into the heart, and that's always on the right side. Now, with this in mind, the pulmonary trunk sends an artery to the left side and one to the right side. You should expect to find it when you're looking for the pulmonary arteries. I'm going to write a left and right here. Left plus right. Now, with this in mind, if we keep staying on these large vessels, we have our other artery. This one's painted in red because it is actually going to deliver oxygenated blood away from the heart. This one delivers deoxygenated blood. That's why it's blue. But otherwise, an artery sends blood away from the heart. This one sends blood away. The aorta is the name of the whole thing. This part where it arches, where I kind of highlighted, this is the aortic arch, where it arches over the pulmonary trunk. It does this because if you flip it over, you must remember that the goal of this aorta is to pump blood down through the abdominal cavity. So this will eventually come down and serve the abdomen. And so it arches over the pulmonary trunk. And so you can see I kind of drew pulmonary trunk here is where it branches. One pulmonary artery is going to the left side, the left lung. This one's going to deliver blood to the right side. And this aortic arch allows the aorta to pump blood around the heart. With this in mind, we still stay on this side and we look at the right side. This right side has the superior vena cava, and the inferior vena cava is a large vein that does the same thing as the superior vena cava. Large veins bring blood into the heart. Large arteries send blood away from the heart. Right? So veins bring blood in, arteries take blood out. The superior and inferior vena cava are always on the right side. Your brain should jump to that immediately. And right with those two facts, you already know blood flow. In the heart, which part of the heart receives deoxygenated blood from the body? What's the answer there? The right atrium. Deoxygenated. What's the only reason you got to come back to the heart? If you're a little blood cell, you got to come back to the heart because your blood cell has used up all its oxygen. You got to go to the lungs. So now this is a big fact for all of you. The right side, the right atrium, is the first stop for blood making its way to the lungs. It is a dumping site for deoxygenated blood. So that finding that right side is incredibly important right away. After that, the rest is simple gross anatomy. Above, we're going to open up the heart in a bit, and you're going to see that there's chambers inside. And so the areas outside are named after the chamber. The chamber in here is called the atrium. And so even the outside area around it is called the atrium. This large chamber that will be here is called the right ventricle. And so you have to envision two chambers, an atrium and a ventricle on the right side. And the good news is, you know this half, you now know the other half. This other half is going to be where we find the left atrium, which is going to be the chamber on the other side, inside of it, and the area, region above it. And the left ventricle, which I kind of had made my own LV here, this is going to be that chamber making up the inside space here. So the heart isn't that complicated. It's just a box like this. Conceptually, you can make a box, I mean to say. LA, oops, sorry, wrong way. RA, right ventricle, left atrium, left ventricle. And so 4 chambers inside the heart. They're pretty easy, right and left. And the superior vena cava will always be on the right side, and the inferior vena cava as well. Now these structures, the atria has this flap over it called the auricle. It's a tissue that allows it to expand if necessary, and they're named kind of like to mean ear flap. Even your ear itself is sometimes referred to as the auricle, so it's kind of like an ear flap for the atria. And it allows the atria to expand if need be. The next thing is that there's this groove here that fat and blood vessels can run through. That groove is called coronary sulcus. Sulcus means groove. This is called coronary because if you were to imagine a person's face here, I'm going to draw my best here, see if I can. Here, if you had eyeballs, let's make this thicker. If you had eyeballs here, you have a nose, smiley face. Here's where that crown would sit. All right, so the coronary sulcus is named after this crown, like corona, around the heart. So it's a groove that you find within this space. It separates the right atrium and the right ventricle, and it allows fat and blood vessels to run through it. That's the coronary sulcus. There is another sulcus, a groove that separates both the right ventricle and the left ventricle, and it's named after that. Between ventricles. So between ventricle groove. And so there's a groove here where blood vessels and fat run through. That groove is called anterior interventricular sulcus. So these terms, make sure you know how to identify it on this photo. They're highlighted there for you. The last one to address is the ligamentum arteriosum. This is going to be a connection that you find between the aorta and the pulmonary trunk. It's a remnant of when we were fetuses. It's a remnant of when we were fetuses. Just a little ligament keeping them attached together. If you flip the heart around, you'll see some of the same terms from a different aspect, like the coronary sulcus. And then you'll see this huge dumping site, this vessel that gets larger out of all the veins. This one's called the coronary sulcus. This coronary sulcus does the same thing as the superior and inferior vena cava. They bring deoxygenated blood into the right atrium. So now the right atrium's big job is to receive deoxygenated blood from the inferior, superior vena cava, and the coronary sulcus. You must envision arrows of blood flowing into this right atrium, The red ones are delivering blood away. And so what you look at when you look at the heart now is simple. The red arteries are delivering blood to the muscles. These muscles need oxygen. They need nutrients to create ATP as well. And so these deliver all of those oxygen, all of that nutrient to these muscles. And now the blood has to come back. The blood has to come back. It got used up. It's oxygen. So it comes back to the right atrium. And now the right atrium is going to make sure that that blood gets to the lungs. And so red delivers, blue delivers it back without oxygen to reload that oxygen. Moving forward. And so make sure you can identify these. The only term to add here is posterior interventricular sulcus. It's the same thing as the other one in the front. You just switch the name. And again, it's a boundary between the two ventricles. It allows for blood vessels to run through there. And so one of the major take-homes we want to start with here is that deoxygenated blood is always placed in the right atrium. Big take-home. And then to build on your knowledge now so you can absorb it faster, if the right atrium is a dumping site, it's a dumping site for blood that's used up its oxygen. It's deoxygenated. Now I need you to just program your brains that the opposite side, the left atrium, cares about oxygenated blood. It cares about receiving blood that now has oxygen. It'll be important in our story for blood flow. And so oxygenated blood returns to the left atrium. So you need to draw that relationship early. Right atrium deoxygenated, left atrium oxygenated. So while those facts mull over in your brain, something that we're going to briefly touch on. I know there's a lot of text here. Please don't be intimidated. This is more labeling, and it's an easy label. And what is it? This is referred to as coronary circulation. This is a way of saying how does blood circulate around the coronary sulcus and how it provides blood to all the muscles of the atrium and the ventricles. And so when you look at this word, coronary circulation, it's really saying how does the heart get oxygenated? How does it receive blood? And so you can know this by simply understanding how to label. And so we start with the aorta. Remember that the aorta is going to send blood to the entire body. It's an artery sending oxygenated blood away from the heart. Now, if you look very closely at the base of that aorta, you will see two blood vessels that will exit right out of that aorta, and they are going to send oxygenated blood to all of these cardiac muscle cells. And once it does, remember that we have capillaries that connect to the venules, and so the blood cells drop off oxygen, and then they make their way back to the heart. And so the coronary arteries, these are dealing with how blood gets sent to the entire cardiac muscle. And so you have your right coronary artery going towards the right atrium. You can see why it was important to get that right and left pretty quick. This one's right side, so right coronary artery. The other one branching off of that aorta is going to be the left coronary artery. And so you can see that the first tissues to get oxygenated in your body is the heart. The blood is traveling and then it exits out of here before most of it exits out for the rest of the body. And so these coronary arteries will then branch, and you're thinking like streets. Like this one's Grand and Temple, maybe? But anyways, when you think about a street, it's like one street's going, and then it starts branching in one way. Then you give the branch a name. And so the only ones I need you to know are two for the right coronary artery. The first one, the right coronary artery, obviously. And then you'll see that it branches into marginal arteries on this anterior side, which means these branches of arteries. If you flip the heart around, which is what the other picture is, and you follow it, you'll see that there's another one I kind of need you to add here. Posterior interventricular artery. You should all have an idea of where that is. If we follow this side, we're following the right coronary artery. We follow it, you will see that finally we found our posterior interventricular artery. And it runs right in between the interventricular sulcus. That's what it's named after. And so this artery runs through the sulcus. The sulcus is called posterior interventricular sulcus. So this artery is called posterior interventricular artery. Easy peasy. And that's all I need you to know, is that the right coronary artery branches to marginal arteries and branches into the posterior interventricular artery. Don't do anything more on this page. I know there's a lot of text. Really just be able to label circulation. You'll need these as well for the last lab exam. Moving forward, we now go to the left side. The left coronary artery will then become two branches, one that wraps and bends around the heart. That's what that word circumflex means, because it bends in a circular manner. And so that artery will wrap around the heart. And so if we examine it on the other page, it's this one wrapping, it's not the other page, the other picture, it's the one wrapping around. So it goes this way and wraps around, circumflex artery. And it also branched into the famous anterior interventricular artery, which runs through the anterior interventricular sulcus. So just be able to label, don't do more than what's in these boxes. Be able to label these, or know that they stem from the which coronary artery they stem from. That's all I want you to know. Don't overdo this part. Here's the posterior side for the same thing. Now with that, the veins are the opposite, right? If we're dealing with coronary circulation, now we saw how blood gets there. It got through the left and right coronary arteries and all their respective branches. But the veins now, their main job, and this is the big take home here, the main job of all these veins, the blue ones that you're seeing, their job is to draw blood into this coronary sinus. And this coronary sinus's job will then be to place blood that's deoxygenated into the right atrium, which satisfies our rule that veins always really aim to drop off deoxygenated blood into the right atrium. So the coronary sinus is like a vein the main vein for the heart. All blood will return to that coronary sinus. And so, we only have three to worry about. We have our great cardiac vein, which can be found on the left side of our photo here. This vein will bring blood back from the anterior interventricular artery. Once the blood gets used up, it will return through the great cardiac vein. That great cardiac vein will then draw the blood and bring it back to coronary sinus. You're done with that one. It wraps around the left atrium. The middle cardiac vein serves the posterior side, and it comes from the posterior interventricular sulcus, bringing blood into the coronary sinus from that angle of the heart, from that portion of the heart. The small cardiac vein is in between the right ventricle, right atrium, right ventricle, and so that's our small cardiac vein conducting or drawing blood into the coronary sinus. And so they all bring blood back into that coronary sinus, making the coronary sinus the main dumping site for the heart, for deoxygenated blood. Be able to label, that's all you need. And where are they all heading? Where are they all delivering blood to? They are all delivering blood to the coronary sinus. Now, with that, we finally get to the end of our cardiovascular segment, and what it's really about is learning of the structures internally and how they all work into blood flow. And so, we examine this photo. We first acquaint ourselves with the terms that we know with an open model. So we look at the right atrium, the left atrium, and then there's going to be muscles that you'll see ridges inside of that atria. The picture here may not draw it ultimately the best, But when you look at the right atria, this is the chamber inside. And you can see along the walls, highlighted in yellow on my screen, these ridges that you see along the wall, these are the pectinate muscles. It's really just cardiac muscle that makes unique shapes, these unique shapes. And so these unique shapes are referred to as pectinate muscles, but it's just cardiac muscle. Now, this is where the story of blood flow begins. You can see all our blue arrows, one coming in from superior vena cava, one coming from inferior vena cava, and there is an opening, oops, wrong one. There is an opening from the coronary sinus, the one that's bringing blood from the outsides of the cardiac muscle. So this coronary sinus, all these three locations draw blood into the atrium. Next, the atria, when it contracts, what that means from the perspective of blood flow, it means a squeezing. Like when you squeeze a medicine dropper, right? You squeeze it, you increase the pressure. That's a physics way of saying you squeezed it and air pushed things out of it. And so in a way, when you squeeze this, it increases pressure and it pushes the fluid into the next chamber right underneath, which is going to be the right ventricle. Now, this right ventricle is going to have a flap that prevents any backflow. These flaps are referred to as valves. And so this valve that separates the right atrium and the right ventricle is referred to as the tricuspid valve. And it's named after the fact that it has three little flaps. So it's like it's saying it has three cusps. I can't say that word. Three cusps. And so that means like three flaps. And so it prevents backflow. Now, as you make your way through, you'll see that these valves are connected to these strings. These strings are attached to cardiac muscle. But the cardiac muscle inside kind of looks like spongy bone. Do you remember what we called the spongy bone? This appearance? We called it trabeculae. And so these structures, because of the shape that you are seeing on these heart walls of the ventricles, this is all called trabeculae carneae, highlighted in blue. Trabeculae carneae. And this word means the shape, trabeculae, is kind of like this weird spiculed shape. Carneae means meaty. So this actually kind of means meaty, the meaty ridges in a way. Meaty shaped, meaty cavernous object. Kind of hard to explain the translation, but it means meaty ridges is what we're going to keep it. That's kind of what I have everybody learn it as. And it means all these cardiac muscle shapes there. And some of them are attached to the valve. And when they're attached to the valve, you have our new term here, you have papillary muscles. Papillary muscles connect to these little strings called chordae tendinea. Chordae tendinea. That's my way to help you pronounce it. And it means in Latin, tendinous cords. And so the chordae tendinea are connected to the papillary muscles and the valve. Ask away.
So what's the difference between papillary muscles and trabeculae carneae?
I would say that papillary muscles are specifically attached to chordae tendinea. And the appearance is what we call trabeculae carneae. The appearance of all these like mountains of meat here, of cardiac muscle. But just the ones that are attached to chordae tendinea, papillary muscles. Now, good news for all of you is that if you know this side, the way we just discussed, everything is exactly the same on the opposite side. There's the left atrium, there's pectinate muscles. They don't show you, but there is pectinate muscles. There's a valve again, and this valve is just, there is the only thing that's going to be different name-wise. It's called the mitral valve on that side. So tricuspid on the right side, mitral valve on the left side, and it does the same thing as the other one. It prevents backflow. The mitral valve also goes by bicuspid valve. And if you have trouble remembering that, try to remember the number 32. 3, tricuspid. 2, bicuspid. 32. Okay. And so this bicuspid valve prevents backflow. Now, the only term to add left is that what separates the ventricles is this one called interventricular septum, which means separation between the ventricles. And so it's that division between the right ventricle and the left ventricle that we find it. And again, tricuspid and bicuspid, if you were to look directly at the flaps head on, if you were blood, it would look like this to you. 3 flaps that open. They kind of, I don't have 3 hands, but they open, close, open, and I would do it up there if I could with 3. Bicuspid means there's only 2, so it opens like this, opens, closes, opens, closes. Tricuspid, bicuspid. All right. Now for blood flow, and we can finish up these notes. Now blood, the reason the heart can be confusing, but why it is easy, is that all you got to do is separate your left and your right side. Sorry, your right side and your left side. So notice right atrium, right ventricle. Then we look at our arrows right through into the pulmonary trunk. Right through another valve that prevents backflow. This valve prevents backflow into the pulmonary trunk. Therefore, it's called the pulmonary valve, or more commonly, the pulmonary semilunar valve. And so this prevents backflow once it makes its way into the pulmonary trunk. The rest of the story you pretty much know. The pulmonary trunk will lead blood to the pulmonary arteries on both sides. And the pulmonary arteries will then send blood to get oxygenated. And that's it. You'll notice that the right side is not connected to the left immediately. The right doesn't care about this one. This chamber doesn't care about this one. Blood goes into the heart for half of it, exits, goes to the lungs, and then it comes right back into the left atrium, and it comes back refreshed with new oxygen. And so the left atrium receives blood from the lungs, and it is oxygenated. So it left here deoxygenated, came back oxygenated. And now this left atrium will pass blood into the left ventricle. It has to go through the bicuspid valve, which prevents backflow. The bicuspid valve is linked to chordae tendineae, which are linked to papillary muscles. This blood will then, this ventricle chamber, you'll notice, is also larger on this left-hand side. And think about why. This side only has, the right side only has to pump blood to the lungs, which are right next door. This ventricle chamber has to pump blood all the way to the top of my skull and all the way to my toes. The pressure has to reach the blood vessels all the way to your feet. And so this chamber is larger, and it causes or pushes with much more pressure than the right side, so it tends to be enveloped with more cardiac muscle. With this, blood will flow to the aorta, and the aorta's job is to deliver blood to every part of your body, including the heart, right? We saw the right and left coronary arteries that feed the blood. So blood exits and supplies blood everywhere. And that's, you're seeing the arrows exiting because blood is leaving the heart oxygenated. And so that's the story. Follow the blue all the way from inferior superior vena cava, follow blue, goes to lungs. Don't forget, superior vena cava, inferior vena cava are veins, so is the coronary sinus. The pulmonary trunk, even though it's blue, it's an artery. It's sending blood away. And these pulmonary veins are the only veins that are painted red because it is carrying oxygenated blood back to the heart. And so make sure the terms that are in bold, you want to make sure you can identify on that photo. The practice test that will be provided will have this general photo in it. So just be able to label all the numbers it asks for. You should be okay for the exam, but you should still know the ones in bold here. And you'll see that I updated the study guide as well to kind of have the terms that are relevant for each objective. I used that Grok so you guys don't have to pay for it. And then that was, it kind of, or I put my notes in it, and then it kind of picked out all the bolded terms that matter for the objective. So it should save you some time in filling out that study guide or organize your thoughts. Okay, so look at that new study guide, it's posted there for you. I only want to do need respiratory. When you've managed to learn these structures by memory, try to look at this flow chart and have it make sense. All right, so you can see this is where we start. Superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, coronary sinus. Blood flows into the right atria, goes through the tricuspid valve, goes to the right ventricle, then it goes through the pulmonary semilunar valve or just pulmonary valve. And then it goes into the respiratory system. It goes into the lungs. We only know this story. It goes into the pulmonary trunk, the pulmonary arteries, and then we know it goes to the lungs. Today, after our little mini break, we're going to start what exactly happens to blood cells here. How did they go from the pulmonary arteries and come back in the pulmonary veins and all of a sudden come back with oxygen? So conceptually right now, what I need you to grasp, blood goes to the lungs, it exchanges CO2 for oxygen. This happens at a structure called alveoli, which we've mentioned slightly before. And this process of going from into the lungs and out of the lungs and back to the heart, this is called the pulmonary circuit. The pulmonary circuit. Because it goes to the pulmones, pulmonary, to the lungs. Now, blood comes back with oxygen, and then it goes to the left atrium, goes through the bicuspid valve, the left ventricle, the aortic semilunar valve, the aorta. And then when we say the aorta delivers blood to the whole body, we can't just say whole body. We got to sound smart since we're in anatomy class. Whole body in this class means systemic circulation. The whole body's the system, systemic circulation. And now those same blood cells deliver oxygenated blood to the whole body, but the cells of the body will give it CO2 to replace that oxygen. So they take up that oxygen, they provide it CO2. Now these red blood cells are on a mission to come back to the heart and repeat this process all over again. And so this is how blood flows through the heart and then through the lungs. We kind of don't really know what's going on here yet, but it comes back to the heart, through the body, back to the heart, and that's the general blood flow. And lastly, this is all possible through the conduction system. And so this is how the nerve or action potentials arrive to the cardiac muscle. And so these are essentially nerve fibers that trigger or have neuromuscular junctions with the cardiac muscle. And so this is where the nerves travel through to activate those cardiac muscle cells. So the first one we have is our sinoatrial node, the SA node for short. It is known as the pacemaker because this, once it fires an action potential, the rest of it fires. And so it determines the pace because it is the first one or the first action potential is generated there. So each heartbeat begins with an action potential at the SA node. That is where the impulse is initiated. And then everything else is easy. I just need you to know the branches of where that action potential is traveling. So, from the SA node, it goes between one node to the other. That's why this is called between node, internodal. So this pathway connects both nodes. This one's between the atria and the ventricle, so it's called the atrioventricular node, or AV node for short. The AV node will lead to branches, but it comes from a bundle. So this bundle will branch. The bundle together is called AV bundle. When that AV bundle branches, it's called a bundle branch. And then finally, the nerves that serve the large ventricles are called Purkinje fibers. Purkinje, pronounced Purkinje fibers. And this is electrical conduction, how action potential pathway through the heart. You need to know the order, that's all. And you need to remember that the SA node is the pacemaker. And that means that that is where the impulse is generated. And that's good enough for this page. With that, I don't think we'll have page for that time for a sidebar on the last page of these notes. So don't worry about it. And maybe on another time, maybe we have some extra time in the lab when we talk about the heart again. I'll bring it up so we can interpret EKGs, but it won't be tested for in this lab. I just like to kind of talk about what is it and how it relates to the electrical conduction system. So we're going to put a pin on this for fun. Okay, this is not a part 2 and the conclusion of the heart videos.